Hello everyone, welcome to Animator's Breakfast, which is a podcast where we talk about inspiration with different people in the animation industry. The whole idea of this podcast is, rather than, let's say, talking about a career or anything like that, it's more about what actually sparked them to think about a career, or what moments in their career when they watch something that has inspired them has actually kind of set a trajectory for their style, or just something that they like. So today I've got a lovely treat. I've got Aidan McAteer here, who is an episodic director on Rescue Bots Academy at the moment, and has previously went on and directed the most recent series of Danger Mouse, which I'm pretty sure you won Best Director for.
That's
at
right,
Dingle.
yeah.
How do you feel about that?
That was nice.
Yeah.
It was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
So it was, and it's, it's nice to be recognised and everything.
Yeah.
I kind of said even at the time, I'm like, that kind of thing, directing for animation is kind of a team sport.
Yes.
So it's sort of everybody contributes something, and sort of
Absolutely.
if you didn't have that sort of exact team in place at that time, the show would be different again,
Yeah.
So I don't feel slightly fraudulent taking credit for it, but it's nice.
The roll of the dice landed well, let's say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Aidan has also directed many little shorts as well. We did an interview, what was it, last year?
Something like that, yeah.
Where we went through it all. I'm not going to rehash everything.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff in
Yeah,
there.
there's so many things. But today we're here to talk about a feature that Aidan picked. So let's talk a bit about it there. I'll leave it to you.
Okay, maybe, I felt a bit guilty about picking this, right?
Okay.
Because it's just so obvious, right? It's like picking the Mona Lisa or something. You don't talk about painting or something like that. So we're going to talk about the Iron Giant. And I wanted to talk about other more interesting, cool things,
yes.
but I just couldn't bring myself to do it in the end. In that, we could talk about something like I really like, say, that's more current. One Punch Man or something, which is amazing. Like for me, as a sort of a grown-up.
Do you know, I was talking, sorry to cut in.
Yeah.
I was talking to two guys who are actually going to be on the podcast later, and they were saying that One Punch Man is actually supposed to be a parody of On Pon Man. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't seen On Pon Man.
Yeah, On Pon Man is like this, he's a Japanese food mascot, essentially. And they took
a lot
him,
of them.
Yeah, they took him and like his colours, they inverted it. And kind of the enemies that he has are very similar to the enemies that One Punch Man has.
Okay.
And it's like a play on that, On Pon Man, One Punch Man.
All right, because I always thought it was just more of a general sort of, taking a piss out of, anime, basically.
Which it does as well.
But it is like, as a sort of a grown-up child man, that's the perfect Saturday morning cartoon, really, as far as I'm concerned, And there was loads of stuff I wanted to talk about, or maybe there's another movie that actually quite a lot of the crew from the Iron Giant worked on, which is called Cats Don't Dance, which is, I think it was the Warners before this. Which I just love the animation style. It's really cartoony, but it's still a very kind of straight musical kind of thing, which isn't really my thing.
Yeah.
So you look at the Iron Giant, and it's not a perfect movie, but god damn it, it's close, and sort of everything is great in it. So I'm sort of big into this sort of emotional engagement thing, and
Amazing,
that obviously has it, right?
Yeah.
In spades. And then you can just completely nerd out on the animation and all the tiny little animation things that happen in it. And it's kind of there are maybe a couple of criticisms, but very hard to criticize anything. And how do you not pick it?
Yeah.
So sorry. That's my apology for picking
Apologies,
this completely
everyone.
obvious choice.
How dare you?
I know. How dare
Sully their ears with this beautiful film.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, when did you first see The Iron Giant?
So there you go. So the first connection is it came out in 99.
Yeah.
Which is when I went into Ballyfermot and started animation college in 99.
Wow.
So kind of sometimes wonder about what time you get in the industry obviously has a huge effect. By the time we graduated, it was this weird time where sort of traditional was still around, but it was basically dead. And then the kind of digital stuff hadn't really happened. It was kind of too early for that. So I sometimes feel like I was in this weird Netherland, and if I had been sort of 5 or 6 years older, I could have maybe even got in on the end of Bluth or something, and I could have done all this cool stuff, but it didn't. And anyway, one of the good things about it is this. You go into college and you see the Iron Giant, and it just blows your mind. Yeah. And if there was any doubt of what I wanted to get into, this completely, obliterated that. Yeah, exactly. It's sort of incredible,
Yeah.
And again, people will probably know this, but it wasn't a big box office success. Like in Ballyfermot, we were all going mental for it, but But it was, no one went to see it, like, you know, and I guess, you know, whatever. There's the old stories about that marketing and whatever else, and you kind of feel like it's not really the film's fault.
Yeah.
And even if, you know, like if you take sort of the opening sequence of that, I remember people have kind of said to me, it's like if they'd actually used the opening sequence as the trailer, that, you know, boom, you know, people would have been flocking in to see it. I think,
as opposed to the trailer that they made.
It's just one of those kind of cheesy trailers, you know, and it is. I mean, it's groundbreaking in some ways, but it's not as groundbreaking. So 95, you have Toy Story, okay? So there has been sort of bits of CG animation, and 99 also has Toy Story 2, as far as I know. Yes. We probably got that 2000, I'm sure. We always get Pixar movies later, don't we?
Yeah.
But if you look at the other stuff that's going on around that time, so Fantasia 2000 is 2099 as well.
Yeah.
And like you compare something like that to this, it's like the CG, the kind of everything, which is not to take away from Fantasia 2000. There's lovely things in it, but something like the whale sequence or the tin soldier sequence, like that CG is like, you look at that now, it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Whereas this, you know, and we'll get into it, but even, you know, the Iron Giant really sits into that background amazingly.
Really,
still, while you watch it today, it looks great, you know. I think so. Yeah. So I first saw it in college, and then have revisited it several times. I have. Oh, hang on. I'm gonna move away from the mic for one second.
Yeah. He's brought a full-sized figure of the Iron Giant.
Brought a small-sized figure of the Iron Giant.
Oh my God! Can I see it?
So that is from the original VHS release.
Oh my God!
Where you got a box set of the VHS. You got the book.
Can I move these parts?
You can. Okay. Yeah, it's sort of up and down. Yeah, and his head rotates all the way around. I think.
Oh wow! I'm not going to do that.
But you got the VHS. You got the original Ted Hughes novel, which is called The Iron Man, and you got that little toy.
You got the novel as well.
Yeah, you got the novel as well. So it was like a special edition VHS kind of box thing. I still have the book. I don't know where the VHS went, but sure, I don't think I went and play it on anyway, even if I did.
And not unless you go back to college again and find some old archaic.
So there he is.
That's incredible. Wow, thank you so much.
So that was, you know, as I say, you watch it on VHS, you get the DVD when it comes out, you get the Super. They recently released that Super Special Edition DVD, which is great. And I have the Art of book and all that kind of stuff.
Course,
so you kind of just revisit it throughout life. And I can't even... I worked in Singapore for a while, and you know, Singapore's a crazy place, and there's lots of good things, but they're not a huge cultural place because the country's very young and that kind of stuff. And it doesn't have, but I do remember they had this sort of the closest thing to art house cinema that they have there, and I don't mean that to sound condescending. It's just it doesn't exist, that kind of thing. Yeah. And they showed the Iron Giant one day, and everyone from the studio went to see it, and there's another, and that was just like a couple of years ago. Yeah. So it's sort of, you know, I don't know that I'd go and see a huge amount of the Disney films necessarily if they were re-released on the cinema, but anytime there's an Iron Giant, you kind of always kind of have to go.
It's something that there was a quote that I found. He's a film critic, goes by Moriarty.
Okay.
Drew McWeeny is his name, and he said that the Iron Giant, it's not a film that people like casually. It's a film that people love dearly. It's just something that kind of gets in the root of it. And I'm the same. Like when I saw the Iron Giant, I was just like, oh my God. And I remember even a few years ago talking to my friend, he was like, it's still not on Blu-ray. You know, he's going crazy about it. I was like, how is that film not released on Blu-ray? People love it. It's still, I think, in any top 10 list I've ever read, it's in there somewhere usually, or top 15. It's still ranked as one of the greatest animated films ever made. Yeah,
absolutely. And like, I don't know, how could it not be? I think
selfish. Well, you had the props ready.
I mean, exactly. So, and
it's a good thing you didn't bring in dancing cats.
Exactly. I'd have to bring my cat in and get him to dance in front of us. But because we'd even read the book in school. Probably second class, third class, we read the book, The Iron Man, so which is very different.
Yeah, it is very different.
But I did, I was kind of aware of it already, whereas I think a lot of people wouldn't have known the source material. And even, I'd never listened to, you know that it was originally a musical?
Pete Townsend.
It was the Pete Townsend album, So.
It reminds me a lot of War of the Worlds.
Yes.
And Phil Lynott he was on a musical version of that.
Right.
They sound kind of very similar.
Okay.
Samey, kind of like, we're here to win, na 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 na. You know, that kind of, that's what the Pete Townsend is.
Yeah, haven't had the pleasure. But again, it was, so Brad Bird then was...
Brad Bird, of course,
decided actually, let's not make it a musical. And again, like... It's not groundbreaking in that we've had Toy Story and Toy Story 2, but at the same time, all the Disney movies, you're still in that like Mulan, Hunchback of Notre Dame, you know, this
Tarzan,
90s,
Hercules,
exactly, this 90s musical thing, and I think Warner's, you often hear interviews of Brad Bird, and he sort of talks about his struggle with Warner's and trying to convince them of this, that, and the other. And I think it took a bit of a struggle to kind of unmusical it a little bit. And I think Pete Townsend was kind of pissed off with the whole thing, but in the end, he was sort of, you know,
just like whatever.
There's some quote from him saying, "Oh well, I still got paid" or something like that. You know, and even in terms of then, so you start looking at, which always gets overlooked, and gets overlooked a lot in films generally, is this kind of sort of background style and the art direction of the movie that isn't the animation. Because animators start talking about animation, and even if you listen to the audio commentary on the DVD or the Blu-ray, you know, they're always banging on about the animation, but they don't mention the very little, the backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. And it is that kind of... obviously, it's Rockwell, right? It's Barbara Norman Rockwell. The town's called Rockwell that it's set in, right? And also people like Edward Hopper or something.
Okay. So
this sort of American, and it's sort of that time as well. This is all, I guess the story is 57, I think it's supposed to be set in.
Okay.
And I love all that stuff. I love Edward Hopper. It's amazing. Like I remember we were in New York one year and going to the MoMA, and we went on it's free on like a Friday night or something. Yeah. And of course the place is mobbed. Yeah. And I got really annoyed because there's this wonderful Hopper painting of this woman in a theatre, like, is it a cinema or a theatre? Anyway, she's standing sort of beside the curtain door, and the light's just on her, and it's beautiful and everything. I got really annoyed no one was stopping to look at this. They were all looking at all the other stuff. I'm like, this is genius. What are you doing? You're missing out. We're walking straight past it. And it's by like the bloody banister of it's not even in a room. Yeah. I mean, I guess the MoMA has amazing stuff in it, but I was just staring at this, and I was sort of, because I love that stuff. Yeah,
as people asked you to move out or way.
Kind of, as people were kind of squishing by me, and I was like, and they're all trying to get to Starry Starry Night, which is amazing, but they're just, you know, this is something incredible too. Yeah. So that influence as well, again, sort of tuned me into it even more so, if that's not obvious. Yeah. Even in terms of an achievement, if you think of the people who worked on that, like, you know, so many of them went off and did amazing things. Right, obviously there's Brad Bird and there's Tony Fuccelli and Teddy Newton and like his kind of gang that he then brought to Pixar, and they've all shaped Pixar. Like I think especially Tony Fuccelli, who's like the sort of lead animator, kind of character designer guy. Like his style is now the 2D style of Pixar. Yeah, you know, anytime you see any drawings in those art books,
stunning work,
not just from not just from
always
Brad Bird
him,
movies. And it was always that style, like he sort of you know, whatever created or influenced that style a huge amount. But then there's also people like Lauren Faust, for example, was an animator on that, and then she went on, you know, she worked on Powerpuff Girls, and she created the latest My Little Pony, and now she's sort of in charge of the DC Superhero Girls show. So, and you know, she's been a part of all this stuff, and she started there. And then you think, like, there's lovely Irish connections. There's a guy called Fergal Riley, who's an amazing storyboard artist, who went on, he directed the Angry Birds movie, and has storyboarded on everything, and worked with Sam Raimi and all these kind of things, and he boarded on the Iron Giant. And then of course there's Richie Benham, who is like, you know, I say because he came from Ballyfermot and all that kind of stuff. He's from, and like phenomenal animator, won an Oscar for his work on Avatar. And you know, he did amazing stuff on that, and quite young. And you know, if you hear him tell stories about it, he's like, you know, Brad Bird could see that he was really keen to do it, and he was like, all right, okay, you do it. And there's that bit where you know, where the hand is separated and it's running around in the house, and Hogarth's trying not to make sure his mum doesn't see the hand. That's all Richie Benham stuff. Wow. And he was one of the few animators he could do 2D or 3D. So there's a bit where Hogarth is like pulling the hand away before Kent Mansley comes to the door, and that's him. He's animated both. He's animated the character, the drawn character, and he's animated the hand.
Which was a very unique skill.
Yeah, they didn't. Not many people did that kind of thing. So there's lovely even connections and people who, you know, who worked on it, and it's sort of one of those. It's like that show. What's it called? Is it called Flapjack?
Flapjack.
Which is then spawned Adventure Time and Regular Show and Gravity Falls and you know, Steven Universe. It's this one thing that's sort of in the middle, and everything else kind of
just shot out.
Shoots out from that. I think the Iron Giant's that kind of movie as well, in that you can see. I mean, some of the people you know were already, you know, amazing Disney well known people, but then others were people who started there who just kept, you know, did amazing things kind of almost from that experience and that team, you know.
That's the same as you know, Ralph Bakshi's Mighty Mouse.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's one of those shows that really just took a group of people who were just young and so full of energy, and they just exploded into the industry. Like Bruce Timm is on that, Andrew Stanton was on that. There were so many people just on that show that just shaped the 90s animation. And then if you think about then the Iron Giant, it just seems to be, if you're making something, get a load of people in from college.
Well, it does. That in particular, I mean, I don't know, I have very mixed feelings about Ralph Bakshi. I really like his attitude, but I don't particularly like his work.
Yes, yeah, and I completely agree with that. And the more I did a video on Ralph Bakshi, and he just was up against, he just wanted to make stuff, so he was just like, I'm just going to make it. And he was just up against financial pressure the whole time, cut so many corners. And he had a lot of things to say, but his best, I think, talent was fostering talent, I think. And that was really what he fought so hard for the industry to get away from Disney. Yeah. And that was kind of his best legacy, is probably still that.
I think so. I mean, because he was like very blatantly just trying to do things on the cheap, right?
Yeah.
And that's why he hired these people straight out of college. That's the only reason, because he could pay them very little, you know. But at the same time, you've got to give him some sort of credit for recognizing the talent and stuff, you know. I think. But yeah, and like I love that interview from Comic-Con, like whatever it is, 10 years ago, where he's like, "What are you doing? Why don't you start your own bloody studio? You know, you losers." You know. And it does. You know, it's a real call to arms kind of thing. It's great. And then, I don't know, then you go look at some of the stuff and you're like, it's just not my thing, I think. I mean, a lot of people love it, and that's fair enough. It's just not.
It's very much on a very far side of the spectrum when it comes to influential animation, let's say. Because people like, in my own opinion, people like whatever you like is what you're going to make anyways, and what you gravitate towards. Like you obviously in the Iron Giant and all the painting styles and everything like that. But with some people, like let's say, you know, Don Hertzfeld or any of his work, like that's so crazy outside spectrum, but so simply done that you can see people being influenced by that very easily as well, you know.
It's super.
It's so far out there, but I'll bring it back to the Iron Giant before I go on. Yeah,
no, we could go off onto all kinds of tangents, couldn't we? So, I mean, I was an animator for whatever, 10 years, I suppose, and like, I think, you know, and I'm kind of directing now and doing little bits of writing and boarding and stuff like that. And I think I was sort of okay animator. I was never amazing animator. So I can definitely appreciate animation. But one of the things that I'm passionate about now is obviously story. And I was kind of looking through, and I was listening to some of the audio documentary or the audio commentary and various other bits and pieces. And it's sort of this amazing story in that it's quite simple and straightforward.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's kind of an awful lot going on. So you have your opening premise, your what if statement. People always talk about what if. So that's how you come up with the stories. Like so the what if statement in the Iron Giant is, what if a gun had a soul? Okay. Yeah. So you go, okay, that's interesting. That's quite good. And the theme then of the film is you are what you choose to be. Yeah. Okay. So this guy's a gun, but he's not going to. The Iron Giant is a weapon essentially, but actually in the end he's going to save everybody. So do we need to say spoilers? I mean,
no,
surely.
This show is nothing but spoilers. Okay. I tell you that.
So let's, sorry. Go watch The Iron Giant. It's great. You'll love it. So I mean, and that's, it's not a cliche, but it's something you try and see being done in animation a lot, I think.
Yes.
But so you could kind of go, oh God, here we go, another one, just be yourself kind of nonsense. But it's kind of more than that. And it is sort of, it's the hero's journey, right? It's a classic sort of Joseph Campbell thing. But it's not actually, interestingly, I was thinking about this in the way in. It's not really Hogarth's story. Hogarth's the kid, for anyone who hasn't seen it. Like, it's the Iron Giant story. Because Hogarth doesn't, I don't think, maybe you disagree, change very much. I don't think he has a huge arc of change really at all. He has this little moment. And what I really love is this little thing of little microcosms of what the story is in moments. Yeah. So even the first time when we meet the Iron Giant, which is he's at the power plant thing. Yeah. And he's sort of, he eats metal, so he's eating metal, but he's actually eating like a electricity substation thing, so it's electrocuting him. Yeah. And Hogarth runs away, first of all, and then there is a little shot where he's like, shit, I better go back and help this guy, you know, which is essentially, that little microcosm is going to be what the Iron Giant does over the space of the entire movie, you know. So it's already within sort of Hogarth, you know, and it's the Iron Giant that goes from, and like, it's so beautifully done. Like when you see him first, he's like Robot Man. So he's sort of like very, well, he's a robot. He is like, you know, so it's all very robotic movements and all that kind of stuff. And there's no, you know, the lights are on but no one's home. There's no, this whole thing of the soul. You can't really even see it yet. Yeah. And then gradually, you know, he kind of turns into a pet, first of all. He's like his dog, first of all. And he even does little things like, will cock his head very slightly and it really looks like a puppy or something. And then he kind of becomes a kid.
Yeah.
There's a bit where they're in the junkyard, in Dean's junkyard, and he's taking a bite of a car, and the horns are and he can't stop it. He's looking around, he doesn't know what to do. He tries to sit on it, that doesn't work. He tries to hit it again, and then he like flings it off. It's a funny bit. But again, that's sort of like, that's kind of kid logic, I think, isn't it? It's like, I don't know what to do.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it eventually becomes this sort of self-sacrificing adult character. So he's got this like amazing arc, like from sort of robot, nothing, like sort of Frankenstein's monster, alien, whatever, to like this sort of very compassionate, heroic, like as I say, very sacrifice myself for everybody else kind of arc, and it's sort of incredible. And but it's done so gradually. I think that's the trick. I mean, I do lots of shorts, and this one that Streets of Fury, and then also Deadly in a Way, was this sort of story of these two people, and you can see them kind of influenced by this kind of stuff. In Streets of Fury, it's this video game character who just like fights and beats people up all the time, and then there's this sheep who is the opposite, who's just like a sheep. Okay. But I've
not seen it.
Yeah, I'll have to show it to you. Yeah, and it probably sounds a bit weird describing it like this, but it is that what you really have to be careful of, if you just do one little moment and suddenly they're best friends forever. Yeah. The audience won't accept it.
No.
You know, this is nonsense.
Think about if you think about like Toy Story and Woody and Buzz, and how their friendship is probably it's one of the strongest friendships on screen. But like, how long did it take them to get there?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the same thing going on here. There's a lovely quote that I always think of. It's a James Joyce quote, which is sentimentality is unearned emotion. So if you're being something sentimental,
there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. So I think what's the most important thing is, if you want these moments of friendship, if you want these moments of self-sacrifice, if you want, a proper relationship, you want the audience to that, you have to earn that.
Yes.
You can't just do it in two scenes. And it's really nicely, gradually done over the course of the Iron Giant. Even just first of all, he doesn't know kind of what's going on, and then he kind of, like, even bits, they have that moment which is amazing where he talks about like killing is bad, but sort of death happens to all of us, and
with the deer.
With the deer, exactly, which is just this beautiful thing. And they very gradually, he's sharing his comic books with him, like even little simple things like that. It's not all just, they're jumping in the lake, all that kind of stuff. There's tons of it, and it's not just he's suddenly friends. And I think that's a real measure of a good sort of writer, director, story team, whatever. It's like, that's technically not story. I mean, it is, but it's not the important mechanics of the story, really. But you have to take time with that. Whereas the little mechanics of the story, actually, they do quite quickly. Because again, I was listening to the audio commentary, and there was some lovely stuff where they were giving examples of like. So Kent Mansley is this FBI, whatever, government agent who's come, and he's got a really sort of, has he got an arc? But he's got a lovely mood. Like, he really changes in that he's like, first of all, you think, he's a really important guy, and then you see he's just this kind of sniveling little guy. But then he turns really mean later on, and quite sinister. Where he like chloroforms the kid, So, but there's the very bit at the start where he comes in and he's like, oh God, I'm out in the boondocks here. I just want to get back to where the real action is in Washington or wherever it is. And he's like, he doesn't believe any of this. So they were kind of saying we needed a way to get him to pivot completely and suddenly be like, holy crap, something's going on here. And the way they do it is that car bit where he gets into he's like, I'm out of here. He gets in his car, he sits down, he realizes half the car has been eaten. And Hogarth's gun is left there as well, and that's kind of the clue or whatever. And he freaks out. So again, even in the acting, it's beautiful. He's like, oh, headstrong. I remember reading, there's a guy called Ed Hooks who does this sort of acting for animation thing. That's kind of his thing. He sort of lectures, goes around. He's written a couple of books on it. And he says that when you talk about acting, you talk about your center, as in like, if you're kind of a big burly character, your center is kind of center of gravity, center of energy is kind of in your chest.
Okay,
but if you think of like, I don't know, Woody Allen or someone neurotic, the center's in your head, and it's all like this. So he's saying his center is kind of his chin, because he's this beautiful design as well. It's such an amazing design of that character, that Kent Mansley character. So he's all chin out, standing straight, and then he suddenly completely freaks out. He's sort of all hunched over, and he's gone from very smooth, I'm in control kind of moves to like tiny little moves and frenetic and frantic and stuff. So the car's there. So now he's like, oh my God, this thing is real. Half my car is gone. And he turns around, he goes to get the guy, the kind of foreman or whatever, and says, look at this, and it's gone.
Yeah.
So that's a really short bit.
Yeah.
But it gives you everything you need to do. It turns him, and they were saying it's a similar thing with Dean, who's the kind of this sort of beatnik character who is sort of like kind of becomes a kind of father figure to Hogarth in it. And he's kind of like, holy crap, man, we got to get this guy out of here. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the giant when he discovers him.
Yeah.
And again, he's got to pivot. He's got to find out, suddenly got to get him on side.
Yeah.
And then you kind of do it in a cut. You cut back, he kind of leaves him there. Hogarth has to go back. And you cut back a little while later, and the Dean has convinced the Iron Giant to help him build all his sculptures, his art thing, because he's an artist. So again, you kind of see that it's just like, it's turned suddenly, and then the third example of that, which I thought was really great, was this thing of the Iron Giant. So now, towards the end of the movie, they're going to reveal the Iron Giant to the town. Yeah. They've got to show the townsfolk that he is not a threat. It's actually a good guy. And the army has to not know about this. Yeah. So they just have the sort of engineer this little thing where he saves two kids. Two kids are hanging off the thing, and he lands and he grabs them. Everyone sees it and it's like, yay. But the army are sort of further back, so all they see is the giant sort of in silhouette over sort of what they perceive to be attacking the town. Yeah. So the point there with all that nonsense is that the things that are narrative important things are done quickly. Yes. Yeah. Car, whatever, helping the thing, saving the kids. They're very short scenes, which gives you then time to actually spend time on these, like even the bit where he's carrying him in his hand and, he's running along and then parts where they're flying. Like, that's amazing. That's real, like never-ending story on the kind of dragon kind of moment, And as, in a way, I so slightly regret that I didn't see this as a kid. I didn't get the opportunity to see this as a kid, because I think you would have, to have those kind of moments, I think would actually go into your kind of psyche growing up.
It's kind of like animation, isn't it? Like you have all your key poses that are still just a pose that you're getting between, but the in-betweens really make what the animation looks good, looks fluid and everything.
Yeah, that's the movement. Yeah, that's where it is really. It gives the other stuff room to breathe, which I think is really clever, and I think that's a really sort of important thing about it. And like all those, so many little moments with Hogarth and the giant and stuff really give a kind of a richness, and and that's other things then that I've always been very aware of, which is that if I'm doing this film that's where an old lady and a Grim Reaper are becoming best friends and deadly, that you can't just flip it like that.
You got to give it its
they've got to not like each other at the start. They've got to then be on some antagonism. Then there's maybe, and then kind of in Deadly, he gets sort of coerced into going out and buying her stuff, and gradually, and then of course he is a montage, which is kind of cheap, but what are you going to do? Because there's only a short, it's a short film. But then you feel like you've earned that friendship. Yes. So then when there's sort of a twist at the end of Deadly, then at least you've earned that. I mean, fair enough.
I see how protective you are.
I don't know. It's 8 minutes and it's sort of one you could see coming, right? Yeah. But anyway, and it's the same here in that if you want that, so the most famous part of this Iron Giant is where he goes, the Superman, and he flies and he says his thing. And if you want that to mean something, and if you want everyone to cry at that, which they always do,
they do. Yeah.
You have to put in the work beforehand, so it actually means something. So it really feels like he's losing something, and these people have been through a journey together. And then there's sort of amazing music. Yeah, Michael Kamen, I think, is the guy's name who wrote the music, and like that's just incredible. That bit, where he's like dun 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 dun, and then it's kind of because it swaps as well. It's really good. He swaps from kind of sad to epic back to sad again. Like, so towards the end, the Iron Giant saves the town, and then we kind of fade off to the town, and they've erected a statue. Yeah. Dean has built it to kind of the memory of the Iron Giant. Yeah. And I remember there's another Brad Byrne thing. He was saying that like Bambi's amazing, but after Bambi's mother died, he always felt really. It cuts to the rabbits having a big little laugh straight after it, and he was like, he always felt angry at the rabbits. It's like, just see what happened. She just died. Why are you so happy? All that kind of thing. So what he was saying was that this kind of coda or epilogue, whatever you want to call it, the music had to be happy because it's the town is safe and whatever. But it couldn't be. It didn't want to be too happy because then it's that exact same thing. It's like the Giants just died. I'm still got tears, So it's a really, and it's true. He does it. It's just like, it's kind of upbeat, but it's kind of bittersweet. Yeah. Which is not an easy thing to do.
No, not at all. It's a very difficult thing. But he'd understand that. Like I remember when I was doing my research on the Iron Giant and watching things like The Giant's Dream, which is a wonderful documentary about the making of it, I'm sure you've seen it, and when he talks about like his sister being killed by a gun and how much that has really affected him. So of course he's going to understand how that grief, like how to get through it, that people do die and guns do kill, you know, but this idea of a soul and living on and really handling death in possibly the most respectful way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. In what is a inverted commas kids film.
Yeah.
You know. And I think it's a nicer, you know, it's a nice lesson, you know, as kids, you know, people say, you know, you have pets maybe who die or grandparents or something or whatever. But, you know, it's a good way, you know, if you can give kids this kind of entertainment, but also it's something that kind of equips them to deal with the world. Like there's a lovely quote from Neil Gaiman at the start of Coraline, where he says, fairy tales exist not to tell children that dragons exist, but that they can be defeated, you know? So it is this wonderful story and all this kind of stuff, but actually it's about sort of conquering fear and things like that. And it's a sort of a similar thing here, is that actually this is part of life, and yes, it's very sad and it's terrible and everything, but actually, you know what? This isn't it's, you know, it's a sad thing, but it is part of life, and it is natural and whatever. And then, you know, you go into sort of like souls live forever, or the memory of people live forever, whatever way you want to kind of interpret that, you know. I think which is like a really nice thing to have, I think, you know?
And when I found out about the film, it really changed my whole perspective on like how that approach was held, and how like that whole deer scene was so pivotal then to make sure that, like, okay, we can't have the giant kill the deer. He just has to see it be killed. Like life is fleeting. It's gone. It's okay. And that idea to put in his head the great sacrifice that he's doing then.
Yeah,
as well,
exactly.
You know?
That's just that earning it again, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the other nice thing again is this. Again, talking about time, the gradual reveal of the fact that this robot, this Iron Giant, is a weapon. Because for a second, just after that sequence, he focuses on the gun. So this is the deer and the gun, and then his eyes go red, and Hogarth kind of snaps him out of it. Or whatever. So, what are you doing? But there's even a moment before that, which again is so nice, which is like the this thing of, like I was saying, the microcosm of the entire story in one go. Which is the bit where they have they're in the barn and he's showing him his comics. Right, it's the first time you see Superman. Okay, but there's a lovely shot where he's going through various comics and he's got like the Spirit, which is like something Brad Bird's always been interested in, and he's got Superman, and then lying on the ground beside them is like the Metal Monster comic or something like that, and it kind of looks very much like what he looks like in his attack mode or whatever. And you kind of see, and he kind of looks there for a second, and then what happens is literally, like, it's kind of obvious when you see it, but literally Hogarth covers Metal Monster with the Superman comic. And that's your movie. That's it, right? It's right there. It's like people are paranoid. There's all this, you know, Russian Cold War stuff in the background that people are really paranoid about. And it's like this threat, you know, sort of coming from afar. And it's like, this thing is a monster. Let's kill it. We don't trust it. To Superman. And it's like an image, and that sort of sums up your whole movie. It's amazing. You know, I just really love that kind of thing.
Well, look, Brad Bird is very good at it when it comes to putting things in the background or visual storytelling. Like, he's so good at it. Even when I was watching The Incredibles 2, like someone pointed out, there's a painting in the background when Helen's in her hotel ringing home. And it's got like 4 figures on the right and 1 on the left, which is like to show the separation, and it's the perfect shapes that, and just those little details of just to reinforce everything in the background, I think is so good.
Yeah, I mean, that's with animation versus live action.
Everything
that's what you can
controlled.
Do. You can do that stuff, you know. And sometimes I wonder if anyone really even sort of
pays attention,
notices this or not. But yeah, exactly.
Do you, let's say with something like, I'll go back to Danger Mouse here, like how much of that do you try and push into backgrounds and things like that? Like, do you have room to do that, or
like again, the TV being what it is, which is always tighter budgets and relatively quick cuts and things like that. We try and put in references and things. I know there's one, we had a Halloween episode with a demon postman, and the demon postman is like a skull with a postman hat on or whatever, and And one of our animators, Mark, is always tries to put in that skull in every single episode. You know, which is kind of fun. And we put it like, you know, even you know, in shows we're doing now, you know, you put background characters are basically based off the crew. And things like that
that's
as well.
such a
you
nice
know?
payoff as well
Yeah,
for the
exactly,
crew.
you know.
Not just do you get to work in it, but there you are forever. You know, that's you there.
Or another Dangerous thing was we came up with so many like was it posters? I can't even remember whose room it was, but it might have been Danger Mackerels. So there's lots of Danger Agents, right? And there's one of them was Danger Mackerel. And he had posters in his room, and it was like the Karate Cod, and like all these kind of loads of puns and things like that. So you can have lots of fun doing that, and because you can, kind of thing. And then you kind of think, well, will anyone see this? Hopefully, you never know.
Yeah, they'll go looking through it now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I hope so.
I think when people go looking and they find it, that's the biggest payoff.
Yeah.
Rather than, or if you do spot it at random, but when you go looking and don't find it, that's when you're just like, oh, I wish that was there. You know?
I think you've got to be doing something good enough to warrant a second view, I suppose, is the thing, isn't it? So it's a good compliment if people do come back and kind of find those things, I think.
One thing I always learned with when I was studying film is I was doing my master's in film studies. They always bet into us, literally. Well, not literally. Figuratively. He was there with a shoe. Don't focus on character and story.
Right.
Which is so against viewing a film. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
When they're just like, put that aside. We know you like this, so you don't like that. It's about everything around that. You have to think about what they're wearing, think about how they're framed, everything, you know, all the visual elements of a story on screen. Think about that.
Yeah.
As opposed to character and story. But it won't work unless the character and story is good. You know, like it merits a second viewing.
It's a funny one.
I don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah.
But it's funny how that's like where the viewpoint is. It's just like, okay, it's made, but it goes beyond that point of just character and story.
Yeah.
Just like focus on everything else as well. And if you look at things like, let's say, The Iron Giant, where we talk about the background style, the background paintings, what everything is named, like everything reinforces what the characters in the story are doing.
Absolutely.
You know?
And you can really see that, like there's this lovely bit at the end, like 2/3 way in, it starts snowing and the colour starts to kind of drop out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
And we get that kind of creepy interrogation sequence where Ken Mansley shines the light. I mean, they do great, amazing things with light in the movie generally, but then it goes monochromatic. Yeah. The backgrounds drop out completely. It's just black behind them, and they've got this sort of very harsh lighting on the side of them. And then, so everything starts to go grey and dark and stuff. And then we start going to the town where you've got snow, it's all worked out. And then when the Iron Giant arrives and starts turning into the sky is blood red. It's amazing, you know. And it happens relatively subtly, but if you look at a still of it, you're like, holy God, look how red that! Like it's really there. And then as you know, he then flies up and sort of saves them. Again, the color drops out. It all becomes there's the explosion or whatever, but actually it washes that red out and it comes to a more calm sort of cool kind of stuff. So you could say, you know, it goes from greys to black to red to thing, and that's what's on screen. But of course, what's informing all those choices is that now, you know, Hogarth's in real trouble.
Yes.
Ken Mansley's now become an actual threat. You know, this is again is sort of very kind of oblique War of the Worlds reference. Even is that, you know, and he's got those kind of War of the Worlds style tendrils that come out. But it's like we're at war here. This is danger, danger, danger. Red sky. Yeah. Everything's okay again. Oh, the colors cool down a bit and everything as well. But you are 100% doing all that stuff to serve the story and the characters. You know, it's amazing.
It's so different. Like it just. I'll probably cut this out, but it really annoyed me when it came to academia. Like I was just like, no, I don't agree with this at all.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah,
I don't quite
agree. Yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah, but that goes to show like the difference of an academic versus someone who's actually we're out there telling the stories.
Yeah,
and that's what we put everything into is the story and the character, and then everything behind that is just to reinforce it.
Yeah, and I think definitely there are filmmakers that do that. And I don't really react too well to those films, to be honest. Like I do, in that I don't get emotionally involved, right? Because we're talking about this being an emotional story, and it's like if everything is beautiful, like perfect composition, everything's really set up for the sake of that.
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
I don't.
yeah.
It takes me out of it, and I like
Mm-hmm.
even things like this isn't really typical of his work. But if you say something like Taxi Driver, which is this amazing film,
Yes. Yeah.
but actually, and there is emotional bits to it, but sometimes like I just think like he kind of drops in the Alka-Seltzer into the cup, and there's a big shot of this fizzing
Yeah.
cup for maybe 10 seconds. Maybe it's probably not that long, but it like seems like forever. And you're like, oh, that's very clever. That's bubbling up the way Travis Bickle is bubbling up under
Yeah.
the surface. But that takes me out of the movie in a way.
Yeah.
And I understand that it's clever. It's kind of up here, it's a head over heart kind of thing,
Yeah.
you know. Whereas this kind of things with a lot more films that I do like, whatever, I don't know, Whiplash or something, right?
Yes.
Which is where you feel every one of those things, and his hands are bleeding while he's playing, and it's like I feel
sweat
this,
everywhere.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's that sort of head versus heart thing, and I'm much more of a kind of a, without sounding too cheesy about it, heart kind of person, or filmmaker. And
Yeah.
again, that's actually some of the great stuff in The Iron Giant is that actually the stuff is beautifully composed and it is happening, but you're not even realizing it's happening. Like I remember the first time, you know, we're talking about the kind of red ending.
Yeah.
Like you don't even notice it when you're watching it first time.
Yeah.
Like you just feel it all, and then you look at it and you go, okay, that's, you know, you watch through the scenes and you go, it's getting a little bit redder and oranger. Each shot is getting progressively thing, but you don't like, you kind of don't see it. It's sort of amazing, you know. And I think that's what I'm really interested in, is like actually you've kind of got both, but it's not this sort of slightly more ponderous taking you out of the story, taking you out of the film. I've just never been into that. I kind of respect it, and I'm, you know, great for people who kind of say, well, the whole thing's an artifice, yeah, okay, and then whatever, okay, so you're going to break the fourth wall, you're going to do all the stuff, you're going to make people aware that they're watching a movie. Fair enough. That's just not the kind of thing I'm into, you know? It's because I think part of the other thing is that because animation is not real.
Yes.
You know, it's drawings or it's
very true.
claymation or it's whatever,
Yeah.
that I kind of lean into that because you kind of have to in order to get people involved. You know,
That's what I think Isao Takada, he said it, that like in animation people are more aware of what's real because you're imitating things.
Yeah.
So you have to work a lot harder.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful movie he made called Only Yesterday. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
don't think I have.
It's really, really beautiful. It's just a coming of age thing. A 27-year-old girl called Teiko goes back to a farm because she wants to get away from Tokyo life.
Right.
But she also, it's intermingled with her memories of her 10-year-old self. But she goes to like a safflower farm. God, that was hard to say. There's just a shot of them just grinding it into paste because they make dye out of it.
Yeah.
And the little machine, like this little filter, is kind of vibrating like that. And then it's all kind of coming out in this tube like a paste and falling into a bucket. And then I had to sit back and go, oh my God, this is animated. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is so good. Whereas if I just watched that on a film, I'd be like, oh, what's next?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's a touch of that, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think. I kind of have slightly the opposite reaction in some ways with things that are, like I remember writing this thing a while ago about kind of silent comedy and amazing feats of, you know, like acrobatics or something like this.
Yeah.
And that's amazing if a person is doing it or somebody is doing their own stunts or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't really work in animation, I don't think, because you don't have that like, oh, is it going to survive? Or it works only in the really good ones.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and there kind of is a bit like, say again, even where in The Iron Giant, where he's about to destroy the ship or whatever. He's gone full killer mode. It's towards the end. The ship's got a nuclear bomb it's going to launch. He's about to fire on the ship, and Hogarth runs out and goes, no, you know, and like for a moment there you think, you know, holy crap, is he actually gonna kill him? You know, and that's if you can get that kind of involvement in these drawings, you know, that's like it's like a Friends joke or something, isn't it? You know, where they're saying, oh, did you not cry Bambi? And he's like, yeah, it was really sad when the man stopped drawing the baby deer. Like, you know, because that's what they are.
Yeah.
But if you can get that kind of emotion, then you're really,
Yeah.
and that's why I feel like doing the clever stuff kind of takes you out of that a little
Yes.
bit away from the characters. But the other nice thing about this as well, which is the other thing that happens in animation, is that like essentially animation is caricature.
Yeah.
So it's all too easy to go over the top.
Yes.
And sometimes actually that's exactly what you want. You know, like, you know, that's why cartoons are there in a way.
Yes.
It's like it's Ren and Stimpy. It's like crazy. It's One Punch Man. You know, it's like, this is insane and it's a real cartoon. You know, that's what they originally were. It's these sort of exaggerated things. But if you are trying, and that's sort of spectacle is good for laughter.
Yeah.
It's probably not so good for kind of empathy and pathos and stuff. So the thing about the theme here, this thing about you are who you choose to be, which, you know, for me, it's a tiny bit hit over the head at the end.
Yeah.
It's a little bit laid on, a tiny bit thick
Yeah.
at the end. But the way that's first delivered, which is where Dean says, is beautiful. It's really just a thrown away line. He's just talking about to the kid. He's like, I think he's given. They're in his house and he's giving the kid espresso.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
Yeah, and he's running around.
He's like,
the
oh,
room. Yeah.
and he's just very casually saying, "Oh no, you don't have to. You know, I'm not accepted. You don't accept. You just, you know, you be who you want to be." And it's beautiful, and that's really like a lovely bit, and it's a lovely bit of understated acting and animation.
Yeah.
And you get it again at the end, that bit where we were just talking about, where if he's about to kill Hogarth, and then he doesn't at the end. He turns back, and he kind of just like puts his giant metal finger on his chest and kind of lifts on his chin just before he heads off into Superman. And it's sort of heartbreaking, and it's so hard to do because he's a big metal thing, right? I worked on a show for a while in Boulder where it's these tiny characters interacting with these human characters. They're kind of that size, and they're in a human world, and that's just hard to even stage, right? It's hard to even get them all in the same shot so they can have a conversation eye to eye. Like even that's tricky, right? Do you know what I mean? Because they're so much bigger. So to have this, it's one thing about having a tender moment with, you know, E.T. and Elliot, right? Which is amazing.
Yeah.
But it's even harder in something like the Iron Giant because E.T. and Elliot are the same, relatively the same size, you know? The Iron Giant's this giant, intimidating metal thing. It's not even made of flesh, you know? Like there's so much going against it, you know? And yet still you have this beautiful, understated sort of moment where he kind of just touches it. Like, I wonder if that was a Disney film from, say, the 90s, would Hogarth be crying? Would the giant start crying? Even the general would probably shed a tear. Do you know what I mean? They would really turn on the waterworks or whatever. Whereas this isn't that, you know? And it's like and there's a tiny, and he says like, you know, whatever, fix, and I go now or whatever, and then he says, don't follow, which is a nice little callback to sort of joke at the start, and it kind of was like this bittersweet thing, and then he goes off. You know, and it's all handled with this, it's kind of grown up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and I love sort of super cartoony stuff and everything, but, you know, there's a time and place for everything. Yeah. You know, and that's the time for it and the place for it. You know, there's this subtlety, and you like sort of lesser animators or lesser directors or story people would have done that in a kind of mawkish, this sentimentality thing again, you know, you could just overplay that and kill it, you know, and I think that's something you kind of need to be, I'm always aware of as well when I'm kind of doing stuff. It's like, let's not overplay this. And try and rein things in a little bit, because sometimes, you know, sometimes less is more. You know?
Absolutely, a nice little silence or something like that.
Yeah.
Give it time to breathe, you know?
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? Which again, you know, there's not very few fast cuts in this, really. There's a couple of little montages when Mansley is kind of hunting them and stuff like that. But actually, like, they're so ponderous. Even that bit, it's absolutely lovely, where just the bit after where they talk about the soul never dies. And he's like kind of realizes this. And then Hogarth kind of jumps down. And then the giant is just left there for himself for a second. And at the start, he's lovely bit of acting. He's like fiddling with the bonnet of a car. He's closing it. Like, they've just seen the deer killed. And this has had a real impact on the giant. So again, you're getting this emotional connection to the thing, and he's just like flicking the thing up and down. He's like, oh, that's a lovely bit of acting. Hogarth comes in, says all the stuff about a soul never dies, goes off, and the Iron Giant kind of sighs, and then he just turns onto his back, and he's just been looking down for the whole scene, and now he looks up to the stars, and suddenly the sort of, you know, and the camera moves up slightly and frames him beautifully. So it's like, it's all there, you know, and that's visual storytelling, and that's quite subtle, but it stays on him. It's slow. It's not snap, 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 you know, which God knows I've been guilty of a million times. It's giving that time. And it all comes back to that thing of like giving the time for the friendship to kind of evolve, and for even the audience's relationship with the giant as well, you know.
And it really speaks back to, like, how do you judge that? And the only way is to really just to kind of feel it out yourself.
I think so, isn't it? Or you try it, and you try it again, and you know, I think that's something why I kind of want to try and get into features a bit more, is because like TV is so quick, and you're just kind of going on instinct and stuff. And actually, TV, basically, you can do essentially more takes, is what it is. You know, really, you know, you can try it out from a different angle, try it different kind of ways and stuff like that, and gives you time to figure out all that kind of stuff, because it's hard to. I remember going to a talk by one of the Pixar animators, and he was talking about that sequence in Up. You know, obviously the sequence in Up,
Yeah,
the
of
very
course.
start.
Yeah.
And you know, and they were saying that you know, they showed the storyboard, the animatic,
Yeah.
and again, and if you feel it from the animatic, you know, you just almost start tearing up at the animatic. And then he kind of said, "Oh, that's you know, that's great." And he says, and then this one comment was, "If you think it was like that the first time we boarded it, you're crazy." This is version 20 up here, right? So it's that kind of, it's an iterative process where you're trying to get better and better and better each time, you know, and you just need the sort of time or the ability to do that a few times in order to get there, kind of thing, you know.
Well, I think time is not in our hands here. I think
true.
we've come to the end of it. Let me ask you something. What I want to ask other people as well. Let's say the Iron Giant. How much has that influenced you then in your day-to-day work, would you say?
So that's, I mean, it's kind of that, especially that idea of relationships and giving time and everything. It's kind of always in the back of my mind in everything I'm doing. You know, you always have to think about the audience first. I remember going to a talk by someone, and she was saying, okay, who's the most important person in a film? And it's like, director, well, they're important, but no. Writer, no. Cameraman, yeah, no. Actors, no. It's the audience. The audience are the most important part of the film, right? So you always have to be thinking about that, and you have to think what you're trying to do. And well, you know, certainly in the kind of filmmaking that I'm, you know, trying to get people involved emotionally in, you've always got to think of the audience, you know. So that, which I think in Iron Giant is always clearly in everybody's sort of mind, is like, are we going to convey this? How are we going to do it? Let's build up this relationship properly. Let's give time to hold. Let there be stillness, and you know. And then when it is crazy, like there's, and I kind of didn't really realize until I'd watched it a couple of times, is like the only time. So you've got a CG model, which means you can move the camera 360 degrees. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. It's hard, but you can do it. But they maybe do that twice in the entire movie. You know, the first half, definitely, there's nothing. The camera's locked off. Well, there's sort of side-to-side little tracks and trucked in and things like that. There's no kind of panning or going round or anything. And then I think the first time they do it, I think, is when he's up there up in the sky and he's carrying him. And that's amazing. That's, again, that sort of never-ending story moment. And then the second time is during the battle. And then, of course, when he flies up to save the whole thing, the camera goes right past. But it's that, you know, if you turn things up to 11 at the start, where do you go from there? You know, it's a real, and that's a really big thing that I've had in stuff that I've worked on, is that you have to build.
Yes.
You know, I worked on this show called Oddbods, which was this non-dialogue show, and a lot of what we were doing was escalation gags. So the story is something happens, and then, you know, you kind of get them into this wacky situation and try and get them back out again, but the situation builds and builds and builds and builds. So if you have your funniest joke, or you have your biggest peril, or your biggest thing, and then you come down, it's like, where do you go from there? You have to build up slowly. And again, that's throughout this movie, you know, timing, like I was saying, with the camera shots, we're not using the thing, with the very gentle reveal of the fact that he's a gun, that he's a weapon, you know, all these things that we talked about are building and building and building. And then you have this amazing action sequence at the end, which I think stands up to any kind of whatever Michael Bay special that you could kind of think of, you know. But it's that, it has so much more impact because actually the first part's been relatively still. It's not boring, but there certainly hasn't been tilting cameras moving around and everything that you get at the end, you know. So definitely those two anyway.
Okay, very nicely wrapped up. Aidan, thank you so much for your time.
All right,
I really
no worries.
appreciate it. How do you feel talking about the Iron Giant after so long?
Good. Yeah, I'm always happy to. You know.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time, okay? And thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
I'll take it. There.